Welcome to our lesson on variations. In this lesson, we are going to look at the concept of ratios. Now, there are three components of ratios that you need to know. The first one is the notation of ratios. Then after the notation of ratios, we'll look at simplification of ratios, and then after simplification of ratios, we'll look at solving ratios. So we have notation, then we have simplification, and solving ratios. So let's start with the notation. What we mean by notation is how do we write ratios? So ratios can be written in three different ways. We write ratios in three different ways. The most common ones are two, and the third one is very popular, though very few people are actually consider that to be a notation of ratios. So if we have for example a ratio written as 1 to 2 to 3, that means we have three ratio parts. So a ratio such as 1 to 2 to 3, 1 to 2 to 3, this can also be written as 1 to 2 to 3, or we can also write a ratio in fraction form, meaning 1 to 2 to 3. Okay, of course, a fraction is basically an idea of a ratio. So in this case, we have a fraction of three parts, which are the writings of a ratio. So now, what does a notation like this, or what does a ratio written in this form mean? What this means is that there is a certain quantity. Let's say we have a whole orange. Okay, so when we say this orange has been shared in the ratio 1 to 2 to 3, it simply means that this orange has been split into 6 equal parts. It has been split into 6 equal parts. Okay, the one whole has been split into equal parts, so that the ratios or the parts are 1, meaning one piece, to 2, which means we have 2 parts. Okay, 1 to 2, then to 3. So that will be the meaning of a ratio of this kind. So it means we have 1 to 2 to 3, so that the total ratio is 6. It means this one whole has been split into 6 equal halves. You get that by simply adding the ratio components. So in short, that is the meaning of a ratio, and that is the notation. We can write a ratio either using the full colon notation, which is read still as 1 to 2 to 3 as an example. We can also write a ratio in words, where the 2 as a ratio is written in words 2, so we can have 1 to 2 to 3, or we can write it as a fraction 1 to 2 to 3. Now usually ratios are written, for example, you can divide one whole into 2 ratios or ratio components. So it means a fraction can have, just like an ordinary fraction, like 2/3 or 5/6. It means you have a ratio of 2 components. So in this example, we have a notation of a ratio which has 3 components. Then how do we simplify ratios? So simplifying ratios, this is a similar concept as finding equivalent fractions. So when we say simplify the ratios or express the ratio in their simplest or lowest terms, what we mean is we apply the idea of equivalent fractions. So for example, a ratio like 10 to 5 to 25. If we have a ratio like 10 to 5 to 25 and we want to simplify it, or we want to write it in its lowest terms, we remember the idea of finding equivalent fractions, where we apply the concept of highest common factor. So it means we find the highest common factor of each of these ratio components, then we divide that through the ratio component. So for example, 10, 5 and 25, we find a number which can go into all these 3 ratio components, and the highest factor among these 3 is a 5. 5 can go into 10, it can go into 5, and it can go into 25. So in short, we can say, to simplify this ratio, we'll say 10 divided by 5. Then that will be the same. Also here we say 5 divided by 5 to 25 divided by 5. So if we simplify that, we'll find that the simplest form, or the lowest term of this ratio, will be 10 divided by 5 is 2, 5 divided by 5 is 1, 25 divided by 5 is 5. So in short, in simple terms, the ratio 10 to 5 to 25 will be 2 to 1 to 5. So we basically simplify ratios in this manner, where we take a ratio to its lowest term, applying the same concept of equivalent fractions. Sometimes we have ratios that are fractions, or ratio components that have maybe mixed fractions or something like that. So we can have, for example, if we want to simplify, let's say we want to simplify 7, a ratio 7 to let's say 8.5 to 3. We want to take this ratio to its simplest form, or we simplify it. What happens? We first change the mixed fraction to an improper fraction. Okay, we change this mixed fraction to an improper fraction. So we know that it is going to be 7 to, this is 2 times 8 is 16, plus 1 is 17. It will be 17 over 2, then 2, 3. So we know that just that part, 8.5, is the same as 17 over 2. So now, since one of the ratio components is a fraction, we make rational numbers out of the other remaining components of the ratio, so that we know that we have fractions throughout by dividing by 1. Okay, so we look at the denominators and find the common denominator. So since the denominators are 1, 2, 1, it means the common denominator is 2. So we need to multiply throughout the ratio by the common denominator. So we are going to say 2 times 7 over 1, which is the same as 2 times 7. Then 2 times 17 over 2. 2 times 3. Okay, so that common denominator will be multiplied throughout the ratio, so that you have there the 2 and the 2 will cancel, meaning that your ratio in its simplest form will be 14 to 17 to 6. Okay, so when you do that, it means you have resolved the fraction parts and you have written the ratio in at least a more simpler form where you don't have fractional components, right? So that is how we can simplify ratios. Then the last aspect of ratios is where you now solve ratios. So the principle for solving ratios follows 3 easy steps. If you want to solve ratios, you follow 3 simple steps. The first step is find the total ratio. Find the total ratio, and you find the total ratio by adding up all the ratio components. Find the total ratio by adding all the ratio components. Then after you find the total ratio, form the fractions. We can say form the ratio fractions of the total ratio. Okay, find or form the ratio fractions. Form the ratio fractions of the total ratio. That is the second step. Then after you have found the ratio fractions, you can simply multiply now those ratio fractions by the amount that is being shared. Okay, the amount that is being shared. So those are the 3 steps. Multiply. The third step is multiply fractions by amount, or multiply amount by fractions. Okay, so you multiply the fractions by whatever amount that is being shared, or the quantity that is being shared. So those are the 3 steps that we follow to solve ratios. So we can look at a simple example just to highlight these 3 steps. Multiply fractions and the quantity to find the amounts. Multiply fraction, the quantity being shared, find the respective amounts being shared. So let's look at an example. Let's say we have an amount of 10,000 kwacha. Let's say there's an amount of 10,000 kwacha which is shared in the ratio 1 to 3. 1 to 3 to 6. Okay, let's say we have 3 ratio components. We want to share the amount 10,000 kwacha in the ratio 1 to 3 to 6. So what we do is we are saying step number 1, we need to find the total ratio. So to find the total ratio, what we simply do is we say 1 plus 3 plus 6. So the total ratio in this case is 10. So what this means is that the amount that is being shared, this amount, it means it has been divided into 10 equal parts. It has been divided into 10 equal parts. So you can actually get the interpretation from here, because if 10,000 kwacha has been shared into 10 equal parts, you can actually realize that you have one share is 1,000 kwacha, because you have this amount being shared into 10. So one share is 1,000 kwacha, which means the one which is getting 1 share will have 1,000 kwacha. The one getting 3 shares will have 1,000 times 3, which is 3,000, and then the one with the 6 shares will get 6,000 kwacha. But here's the procedure. We are saying step number 1, you find the total ratio. So we have found the total ratio, which is 10. Then step number 2, we are saying we find the ratio fractions. So the ratio fractions simply means you get each of these ratio components over the total ratio. So it will be 1 over 10. Those will be our fractions. 1 over 10. Then the other fraction is 3 over 10. And the other fraction is 6 over 10. So those will be our ratio fractions. Those will be our 3 ratio fractions. Then the third step, we are saying what we do is we multiply the fractions by the quantity being shared, which means if we want to know the allocation for the ratio 1 over 10, we simply multiply this fraction by the quantity being shared, which means we will say 1 over 10 times 10,000. Okay, so when we want to know the quantity allocated to the first ratio, we'll simply say 1 over 10 of the 10,000. So when you simplify this, we'll find the value of 1,000 kwacha. Okay, we'll find 1,000 kwacha, which means if this amount was being shared by 3 people in the ratio 1 to 3 to 6, the first person with the ratio of 1 would receive 1,000 kwacha. Then you do the same. To get the ratio for 3, you simply use the fraction 3 over 10. 3 over 10 times 10,000, the quantity being shared. So again, you repeat this procedure, you'll be able to know the amount. Okay, this means you get the quantity of 3,000 kwacha for the allocation of the ratio of 3. Okay, so and if you want to get the remainder, which is allocation for the ratio component 6, you can add the 1,000 and the 3,000, which will give you 4,000. Then you subtract from the 10,000, which will give us 6,000, which is corresponding to the ratio 6. So this is the procedure for solving ratios. And of course, you can get equations arising from here, but the procedure remains the same. You need to have an understanding of the total ratio, the ratio fractions, and then from there you can multiply the fractions to get the quantity divided by the respective ratios.